we are going to take a look at Google Forms, right? Everything from creation to posting it in your Google Classroom. But I want to show you a few tips and tricks along the way to make your life easier and avoid some problems that might come up. To create a Google form, I'm going to start in my Google Drive, click on New, and Google Forms. I'm going to give it a title. When I do that, same as a Google Doc or anything else, after I create my title here, if I come up and just click on the area that says Untitled Form, it'll change it to whatever I typed in. Saves a little bit of time. Couple of quick things I want to show you under Preferences that'll save time later. Preferences are under the More menu, 3 dots. When I click on that, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and click on Preferences. I always set mine to collect email addresses every time I make a form. I also have these 2 checked to make them required and to make any quiz questions that I create by default 1 point. You can change this on individual forms, but since I prefer to have these settings on the majority of my forms, if I set them here, they become my default settings. What that means is every time I create a form in the future, this is what it will do. And then I don't have to remember to go back and collect email addresses. If I want it to be anonymous, I can always turn that off for that one individual form. But generally, I do want to collect email addresses. Same for questions being required and the points being 1. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Under the other buttons, you're going to go under your gear icon here and check your settings. This is where you can turn that on and off for individual forms. If you have it under your preferences, this will automatically be checked. If you want the people filling this out to be able to see a copy of their responses, this will also be checked. Typically, I have that unchecked unless they need a copy of their responses. If you're doing this with students, restrict it to the organization. If this is something you're sending out to families and parents, make sure you uncheck this box, otherwise they won't be able to fill it out. If it's a test or quiz or something you only want the kids to fill out 1 time, make sure you limit it to 1 response. And make sure this stays unchecked for edit after submit if it's something you don't want them to fill out twice. Or if you edit means they can change their answers. So sometimes you want them to be able to, and other times you don't. Just make sure that you check these in order so they're set up the way you want. And then press save. Unless you want to check your presentation and quiz tabs. Under presentation, it just will allow a progress bar if this is a long Google form. You can have a progress bar that shows how far along they are. You can shuffle the question orders so they don't get them in the same order if you're worried about kids giving answers. Makes it more difficult if they don't need to be in a specific order. And then if they're allowed to submit it more than once, you can show that link. Last thing you need to check is if you want it to be a quiz, you're going to turn it off and on right here to make it a quiz. If you want to turn it into locked mode, so once they start the quiz, they can't open any other tabs in order to look for answers. Obviously on a different device they could, but on their school device they would not be able to. You would check this box to turn that on. And then you also need to decide if you're going to immediately release their grade. If it's all true and false multiple choice, you can go ahead and immediately release. If you have any short answer questions, you're going to want to change that to later after manual review. And then I tend to like to uncheck the correct answers. It's okay if they see which ones they got wrong, but I tend to hold off on letting them see the correct answers immediately, because if this is checked, they will see what the correct answers are right away. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and press save on that. One thing you should know too, anytime that you want to see what this looks like from a student view, is the preview button right here. Looks like a little eyeball. This is going to open it up in a new tab. So far this is what it looks like to a person filling out the quiz. I could even go in here and submit this and it would count as a submission. So if you want to test your quiz and actually see what the results look like, you could actually fill it out yourself and submit it when you go into this preview mode. I'm going to go ahead and close that tab. So preview is right there. Okay. You can also change the theme By default, it's always on purple. If you want to just be simply a different color with a different background color, or you can get a little fancier with your images. And you have some other options there. You can also change the font style if you want it to be more as a script. You have a formal option and a playful option. So you do have 4 different font styles to choose from. You can't change the size or make them bold. You can change background color, theme color, and pictures. Okay, go ahead and save that. These are if you have any add-ons. In order to get add-ons, you would come back to your More button and go to this section in order to add on separate add-ons. And then you would have access to using them under this button right here. We're going to go ahead and go into looking at some questions and how to manipulate the questions in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. I'm going to give it a name. And I would type out a question there. You have choice of what type of question, how they answer. So short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkboxes, drop down, a linear scale, and we'll take a look at a few of these, not every single one of them, but you can go ahead and play with those. I'm going to go ahead and go to short answer. One thing that you should be aware of on short answer is if you are grading this, you're going to have to probably manually check your short answers. Otherwise, if somebody spells something wrong or types in something different than what you've put in for an answer, it's going to automatically mark it wrong. Otherwise, you can just manually grade it and check that individual question, yes or no, and give them credit for it. On your questions, you can also, by clicking these 3 dots, you can put in a description. So if you need to give some extra directions or maybe examples, that can come in very handy using the description along with the question in order to give them more information that they need to answer it. When you are doing multiple choice, one option that you have, I'm just going to throw in a few generic options here. You can determine where they go based on their answer by also clicking on the 3 dots and giving it the go to section based on answers. So if they answer option 1, they might go to the next section. If they answer option 2, maybe they go directly to submitting the form. So maybe you have extra questions if this was a yes or no. Yes, move on to the next section. No, just go ahead and submit the form. Or for quizzes, you can set up different sections based on difficulty if they're getting it wrong. Maybe you send them to a different section that has another set of easier questions. If they get it right and you want to challenge them, you can send them to a section that has harder questions. You can also use this when doing things like choose your own adventure stories. You can send them to different sections. So just so you're aware that that's here. To add another question, simply hit the add question key. Another option on short answer that I wanted you to see. If it's a short answer, one of the options that comes up is a response validation. How response validation works is I can specify that I want their that I want their answer to be a number and I want it to be a whole number. So depending on what I'm asking them information of, if they don't answer in a whole number, it won't accept their answer. I could say that I want it to be a number between 0 and 10. And if they give me something outside of 0 and 10, it'll say your answer needs to be between 0 and 10. So you can put in some validation here if you need to make sure they're giving you the information you need. Another example would be under text. They need to, maybe if they're typing in their email address, this would only allow things that appear to be real email addresses is. So if they're missing the .com or .org or .anything, .net, it's going to recognize that it's not a real email address, and it's going to give them a message that says, no, you need to fill in a real email address. So response validation can come in pretty handy. The third type of question that I wanted to show you is a multiple choice grid. How this works is I can set up rows and columns. So if I have some numbers over here, you can turn it into a matching. And over here we have some problems. Okay. In order to see what this looks like, I'm going to hit the preview button. And as you come down now, you can see that we've got the numbers for our rows. We've got these as the heading for our columns, and so they would have to come in, and I could set this up with an answer key, and it's going to right away give them a message that it requires a response per row, so they can't skip any and miss any, and then they have to find and match up. So you could set this up as a matching question, and that's what that one looks like. A lot of people don't use that, so I wanted to make sure that everybody understood how to set this up and what it looks like when it's finished. And it does allow you to do those types of questions. A couple of things over on the right. Adding in a title and description literally just adds in a title and description. There's no question attached to it. It sort of breaks up the sections without creating new sections. So it gives you a little break in the questions if you needed to have extra information there. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. A couple of things about adding images and videos. So when you add an image, there are a couple of things that you should know about that. It does not add it directly tied to that question. It's going to be either above or below a question. It is not, doesn't have a question or answers attached. It's a separate object. So you'll have to say refer to the picture above or refer to the picture below. So if we have a title, we can also center. You'll notice the triangle moved. It's going to move my triangle slightly off. And then another thing that I found was you can add hover text. What that means is if we go back into preview and I scroll down here, if I hover over this, whatever I typed in as the hover text will show. So if kids are hovering over that image anywhere, whatever you typed in as the hover text will show up. Okay, head back over here. Same thing for videos. When you add a video, it also adds it as a separate entity. It's not tied to a question, so you'd have to put it either above or below your question, and then make sure in your directions, maybe that would be a good spot for a title and description. Say, make sure to watch the video before answering the question. And then you can also move these around. And then you could also have a caption tied to this. So maybe the name of the video or some more directions about the video, you could add in a caption. So once you have created all of your questions, you are ready to assign it. So then you would go to your Google Classroom. You would go to classwork, create. I would suggest creating this as an assignment so that you can keep track of who did it and who didn't do it right through Google Classroom. If you do create quiz assignment, what you're actually doing is starting from scratch and creating a blank Google form right here. If it's a short Google form, that's not a bad idea to create it here. It's already tied to it and attached. But most Google Forms, you're going to just create them in your Drive and attach them as assignments. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to add it from my Google Drive. It's going to pull up anything that I've done recently. You can click on that. This is the part that I want to make sure you see. If you want it to pull your grades in, go ahead and have this turned on. This is turned off. It won't pull grades in to Google Classroom. And then you can also set it to be locked mode from here. That would put it into locked mode. This would not be locked mode. Then you can go through all your regular steps of how many points is it worth, which classes do I want it assigned to, which students do I want it assigned to, is there a due date, and is there a topic? And then you can go ahead and assign it. I'm going to go ahead and discard this one. I do have one already posted that we're going to try. So we're going to take a look at how to fill that form out from the student point of view. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the title. Brings me in. This question is asking for the date. This one is asking for a short answer. And we have a couple multiple choice. I do have this set up as a quiz, but I do not have it set up to give answers immediately. It's under review for later. So we're going to head back over to the teacher view and take a look at what that looks like from the teacher view. So as I go back here, because that student submitted their form, it says that it's turned in. Notice I don't see the grades yet. Because I have that short answer, it doesn't know what to mark that short answer yet as right or wrong. How I can look at my responses, I could go back to my Google Drive and find this form in my Google Drive, or I can simply click on the name of it. And then down in the bottom, I'm going to click on edit this form. There's a small pencil down in the bottom right corner. And that brings me into my teacher view. And then I can go ahead into my response tab. If I want to look at individual students, I can look at their individual answers here. If I want to look at it by question, and this is where I get the option of marking it right or wrong. So I can say, yes, that is a good answer. And then I want to save it. So I'll say, yes, that's a good answer, and then make sure you save it down below. So 2 steps. So there's another one. Yes, that's good. Move to the next one. These were not short answer. They were multiple choice, which had right or wrong. So those were graded automatically. If I wanted to change that answer, I could and mark it correct. Since I already had my answer key set up, I don't need to do that. Then when I come back to here, I can decide if that's the score that I wanted them to have, and then I can go ahead and release that score. It's going to let that person know. I'm going to release all of my scores, let them know that those scores have been released and they can see what their grades were. One thing I probably should have mentioned when you are building your forms is the answer key. I'm sorry, I did not do that right away. So when you have your options in here, because I went into my settings and turned this on as a quiz, I now have this answer key option. I have to click on the answer key in order to select one of these as the correct answer. So if this is the correct answer, if it's a question that has more than one correct answer, you can do that too, but then it's probably a 2-point question, and that's where you might change your point value. Otherwise, if I just have one, I can also answer feedback. So if I want them to get some feedback on their correct answer, I could say, good job, and that would give them instant feedback that they got that correct. I could also then give them feedback if they have an incorrect answer and say, watch this video, and I could post a video that shows the correct answer or how to get the correct answer as some really quick way to give them some extra instruction on how to get that answer right. So that was a couple things about setting up your answer key. So you would do the same thing now on short answer. That's where it gets a little bit trickier. I'm going to remove the response validation. You can do it. So like if you were doing this as a spelling test, that would be great because you could literally put the word in and expect them to spell it correctly. However, on any other short answer, if there's variations that you would accept, then you're probably going to just leave this and manually check them correct or not correct, the way that I showed you a minute ago. Or if there's only a couple of correct answers, you could put in a couple of variations, maybe with a capital letter, without a capital letter, and then say it has to be one of those answers, otherwise mark all the rest of them. So if I said that that was correct, I could also say, but if they type this, they also get credit for it. So I could do this and then anticipating that they misspelled something. So I could sit and come up with all these variations and then say mark all other answers incorrect. Or I can leave that unchecked. It'll automatically give them a point if they answer one of these. And if they give me something else, then I have to go in and give it a check mark or mark it wrong when I'm doing my grades. So when I say done, it brings me back to this view. This is not the answer key. This is what the kids would see. So just one more time under preview. This is what the kids see when they open it up. They don't see any of that other stuff related to this. All they see is the question and a spot to type their answer and how many points it's worth. They can hover and see the hover text. They can watch the video. And if I had more questions, they could do that too.